we have a from Uppsala University. Please welcome a Professor Valentin Troll. What should I call you? Did I pronounce your name correctly? Okay. What should I call you then? Val. Val is fine, right? Okay, okay. So for today, we have a very special topics talking about a chemical probe into the Earth's interior. High resolution sampling of recent basaltic eruptions in La Palma and Iceland. And today's event was sponsored by a lot of course, ITV and then IAGI, two of a student association, undergraduate, graduate student association, and then Uppsala, and one more is a, what is this? AGP, right? Yeah. Okay. Before we start everything, we should hear words or two from Mirzam, opening speech, before we start the presentation. Okay, please, Mr. Mirzam, time is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Valentin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First, I would like to thank you for during your tight schedule, you still have time to visit ITB. Welcome to Indonesia, the home of volcano.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the home of volcano. And also, welcome to ITB. So, start from today, so you are become our new member.
Thank you
So, anytime, every time you can visit our home. No worries. So, as mentioned by Jananda, that today we will hear about the volcano, of course, but not only that, we also discuss about the possibility for Indonesian students to have possibility to join with our collaboration research, yeah? And then the possibility not discussing only about the volcanology, but also discussing about exchange student, joint degree, and many things, I think. Currently, I'm the head of the graduate program. Besides that, also the General Secretary of Indonesian Geologists Association. So usually every Friday, we have this seminar, not only for our students, but also so you can see so many of your friends here, including Firman from Banyuwangi. Yeah, yeah. Because, you know, in Indonesia, volcanoes is everywhere. So not enough for us from Bandung to taking care about the Indonesian volcano. So I think this short opening speech from me. Once again, thank you very much on behalf of our department and also from IAGI. Please enjoy the seminar from Professor Valentin Troll in the special day, Valentine Day. Yeah, because today is Valentine Day. Thank you.
Before we start, I'll read a briefly summary of what is he doing and then what is he doing right now. Of course, in Indonesia, he graduated from, you got your PhD from Germany, right?
That's right.
From Germany, and then currently you are employed as a professor of petrology in Uppsala University.
Correct.
And then you've been working out on a lot of volcanoes, right? And then, like I told you, this is the before we start the interview, I told him that I one of the huge fan of it. Actually, yeah. When I was writing, that motivated me to pursue my first study in petrology. We wrote things or two about rapid volcano, and then that's what motivated me to learn a petrology. Well, I was working on flip volcano anyway, but today's your day, and then for this presentation, for this seminar, we'll divide it into two sections. First is your presentation. Then after that, we have a question and answer from the audience in here, and then from the online audience, and then again, after that, we can have a picture together. Okay. And that's good, right? People online? Okay. Okay, then. You ready? No?
I'm absolutely
Okay.
ready, yes.
Shall we start?
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for the kind words. And it's a pleasure being here. So today I'd like to report about what I have been busy with for the last few years. And we had quite a number of eruptions in Europe. While I did quite a bit of work in Indonesia in previous days, but the last few years, compounded by COVID, caused me to focus a little bit on European things. And we had the La Palma eruption, but also the Iceland eruption that is still continuing. And I'd like to summarize some of our work there. Some of this is relevant for Indonesia. Other things may not be so relevant, but you may find it interesting nevertheless. And I think particularly the hazard aspects are very profound. And hopefully I can share some of these impressions and experiences with you today. So I would like to talk about sampling lavas in high resolution. And these two eruptions, La Palma and Iceland, gave us the opportunity to sample very frequently. And this gives us a lot of information. I can say right away, lava erupting in a single eruption is not homogeneous. It changes, and that's fundamental. We can learn different things from these changes. And when I was a student, I thought every eruption is kind of the same, and the lava of a single eruption is identical from the beginning to the end, but it is not so. There's a lot more in detail, and this is where this high-resolution work makes a huge difference. So let's go, and here we, start off as young teenagers reading all sorts of books, and I was quite inspired by Jules Verne, The Journey to the Center of the Earth. And here we have Professor Liedenbrock going into Snæfellsnesjökull volcano, and well, he apparently reached the center of the Earth, and he came out at Stromboli volcano, and this implies that the volcanoes are connected deep inside the Earth. But I assure you, it's not a good idea to climb into volcanoes, so we have to do a better job, and one of the jobs is that we can watch the magma that's erupted as lava, and this gives us actually a message from the inside of the Earth, meaning we don't have to go there, we can indirectly infer things. So magma is therefore one of the most important probes into the Earth interior, because it traveled from the source region in the mantle up to the surface, and therefore we can learn about the source region, but also potentially about the rocks the magma passed on its way. And the erupted lava at the surface can be very diverse, and it is the job of the geologist and the petrologist to understand that language. So this is where we are starting. I'm taking you to these two places today, and here we are. There's the Canary Islands, and there's Iceland, both of them in the northern Atlantic, and we'll start with the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands is an archipelago off Africa, Northwest Africa. Morocco is over here, and here we have 7 large islands, and the islands have an age progression. They go younger towards the west, and we believe this is like the Hawaiian model, that we have a stationary hotspot or plume, and the plate is moving very slowly above it, and this implies that the old islands here, they are deeply eroded, they're very flat because they're so old, and then they go steeper and steeper, and the young islands here, La Palma and El Hierro, are the ones that sit right above the plume. And we can also look at the ocean crust anomalies. Here is the old ocean crust, it's Jurassic ocean crust. Here we have the M25 magnetic anomaly, and this is 156 million years old. And you see the trend of the islands cuts across this. So this is a much younger phenomenon, and it cuts across the old spreading system of the Atlantic Ocean crust. If you want to play games about plate tectonics, you can do that. And here we have the Canary Archipelago, old, young, and here we have the Madeira Archipelago. And there is only few islands here, but they seem to follow a similar trend, and you can reconstruct a rotational pole. It's called an Euler pole, and the two actually fit this rotational pole, making the argument about a plume system over a moving plate rather plausible. So, but I'd like to actually talk more about the eruption of La Palma. I should note that about half of all the historical eruptions in the Canary Islands happened on La Palma, and in fact in southern La Palma. It's the most volcanically active region in the archipelago, and we had a big eruption there 2021. And here's just a few impressions, and we'll go into details now. And the eruption happened on the southern part of the island. Here we have the Cumbre Vieja Ridge. This is this part here. And all of the historical eruptions happened there. The northern part of the island is extinct. It's the Taburiente volcano. And there was a large landslide here. And this one here. And this happened about 550,000 years ago. And a new volcano grew inside, which is called the Bajanado volcano. And after this, the ridge moved towards the south, and that's where we have the historical eruptions. And here's the 1971 eruption. Here is the 1949 eruption. Here's the 2021 eruption. And what I try to say with that is there is no system in terms of that the eruptions go in a particular order. They jump backwards and forwards. And that's an important realization, because that means we cannot forecast where the next eruption will be, and we were not able to forecast where the 21 eruption would happen. So what we can say for sure is that most likely it will be on the ridge, the next eruption, but where, we will not know. And this is, of course, a problem for hazard mitigation. When we look at the projection here we have the 1712, the 1585, 1585, 1949, and this is the 2021 eruption. And you'll see very quickly that these eruptions here were coming from very steep slopes up on the hill, and they form very narrow channels. The problem in 2021 was that here we had a flat area with a lot of people living there, and the eruption unfortunately affected that area. The impressions here in the top right, that's a photo from 1949, and these two in the lower part are from 1971, but the eruption styles are pretty much identical. They haven't changed over the historical time, so they're all fissure eruptions that form lava flows and make sinter cones. So that's good news, because it means we can actually be pretty confident about the style of eruption, but we cannot be so confident about the next place of an eruption. So here's a detailed map, and we don't have to go into all the kind of detailed numbers up there, but the eruption of Tajo Gaita, as it's called, the 2021 eruption, was a little longer than the others, and as you see here, it looks a little bigger, but it's actually just because the ground is very flat and it's spread out. So otherwise, it's a typical rift zone eruption in the sense of the other eruptions on the island of La Palma. So here is a little summary. Scientists knew that there was magma. It's been heralded by seismic activity already in 2017. And the local people may not have been so aware, but the scientists knew something was happening. And in mid-September 21, the seismic swarms intensified, and eventually an eruption began on September 19th in the midday. And the eruption had several active vents, and it emitted about 0.3 cubic kilometers. To give you a reference, Mount St. Helens in 1980 was 0.9. So it's a relatively small eruption. But the VEI, the Volcanic Explosivity Index, was 3, and the plume height was actually several kilometers. The eruption was declared over Christmas 21 after a short period of inactivity. And here is from a clipping from a Spanish newspaper, Dia 1, Day 1, and Dia 87 after 87 days. This is the same house, and you see there's a big sinter cone that had grown. And you can calculate it has grown with a very rapid rate of 3 meters a day. So a very rapid growth, but now it's a monogenetic eruption. So we don't believe that there will be more eruptions on this particular vent. So here's the eruption in full swing. And well, this is the old Takanda Road, and it was blocked obviously by the volcano. That was a big problem for the traffic on the island, because you had to go around the island then. but now they have a new road, and you can see the activity from the main craters here on the sinter cone. There's one here, but there's another one up there, and there's yet another one behind. So this is a little video, and I hope I get this to work. This is to give you an impression of the eruption. How do I go there? Yeah, there. Perfect. It's a little loud. So here's several vents erupting. We can play it again. It's so cool. So it's one fissure system, and there are several vents along the fissure, but as so often, one of the vents becomes dominant, and the others die out. At the beginning, and I'll show this for Iceland later, we may have eruption all along the fissure, but then usually one or maximum two of the vents, they become dominant, and they become the main eruption. So, and of course, the eruption produced a lot of pyroclastic material, and this was the house closest to the volcano. And as you can see, this picture up there in the top left, this is from October, late October 21, and this picture is from December. And not only was the house buried, there was also a vent opening up on December 5th, just in front of the house. And I saw an interview with the house owner recently, and she was very frustrated because the house is, of course, broken. But the mayor of the village suggested she makes a volcano museum out of it. And she was so angry. So she just refuses that anybody is allowed on her property. So I don't know what's going to happen to the house, but it's a very spectacular site where you had the house covered, cracking under the weight. You see the cracks there, and a vent in front of it. So a very dangerous situation. The house is, of course, lost. I don't think anyone can ever live there again. So when we approach the vents, then it looks like this. So a very volcanic, well, desolate landscape. You see the bomb impacts, and of course there's blue haze in the crater. That means sulfur is emitted, and you see also the sulfurous deposits. So this is when you go a little closer, and I could go up to here, and then my stomach didn't play along anymore. I didn't want to go any further, so because it looks a little dangerous, but this is as close as my sampling went. And I'd like to talk a little more about the lavas now, because they were really destructive. And high on the slope, we had these rivers of lava. They were running quite fast, actually. And further down, the rivers were spreading out into fans. So here we have a picture of a river of lava coming down, and out here, it's spreading to make a fan. And this is the problem with the population density here. There's a lot of people living in the area, and the rivers of lava, when they hit the flat ground, they spread out, and it affected a large area. So here's another impression. There's an older volcano cone. It's called Montaña Todoque, and this was before the eruption on the right-hand top side, and this is after the eruption. So the entire area is now completely covered. So this is a picture from October. This is on one of the other old sinter cones. This is Montaña La Laguna. And Todoque, the mountain, is over here. We've just looked at that one. So this is the twin brother, if you will. And this is from October, as I said, and now this is from December. So you see the difference. And the entire area was covered. Many houses, many plantations, but also some islands were left, some areas in between lava flows, and these areas are pretty intact. The problem is only you can't go there because you can't walk over fresh lava. So these were isolated areas, and now they're trying to build new roads to connect these areas again. This is an impression from the village of La Laguna. And this is lava coming into the village. And when I first went there, I sent this picture home to my wife. And my wife was not commenting on the lava. She said, oh, the poor tree. So, and she asked me, has the tree survived? And I said, I'll check on the tree next time. So when I was back a month later, I went back and I checked on the tree, and the tree did not survive. So it was a little too warm for the tree, I'm afraid. So, but you get the idea. There's a lot of damage now, and this has now been cleared out. And this is where the new road starts that goes over the lava field. So here we have an impression of lava in a banana plantation, and the pyroclastic material and lavas covered together about 1,000 hectares of farmland. This is a large area, certainly for Canary Island standards. So here is damage now to the villages, and this is another little video. Let's see that I get, can you take care of this? So have a look at this. Thank you. And just when the video stops, there was a big explosion because there was a gas tank in the house as well, but I didn't film that because I was running away. So, but you see the damage. This is the blocky AA lava that's a bit further away from the vent, and the problem with that lava is you cannot really stop it. There was a church in the village of Todoke, and the local people were trying to stop the lava, and they were digging trenches. They were thinking in terms of pahoihoi lava, because that would flow like water, if you will. But AA lava moves very differently. It's more like a caterpillar. It rolls over things. And while the local people have admirably tried to save the church, the scientists already said when they started, it's useless. It's the wrong type of lava. And indeed, the church was rolled over by the lava and is now buried under it. So the eruption lasted for 85 days, which is in itself an economic problem. Almost 8,000 people were evacuated, 2,800 buildings were destroyed, of which 1,300 were homes. Over 1,000 hectares of plantation land was covered or destroyed. 70 kilometers of vital roads were cut off, causing a real problem because you couldn't go from north to south on the west side of the island. You had to drive around, which caused a lot of traffic issues. And although nobody died directly in the eruption, there was one accident, but that was because somebody snuck into the exclusion zone secretly, and that should not be the case. But no direct loss of life, but the total estimate of financial loss is 1 billion euro, i.e. 1,000 million euro. So it's very expensive. So here's just a few impressions of the various devastation, and this happened very late. December 5th of the year. Here we have the December 5th lava going over the cemetery in Las Manchas. And this was psychologically very damaging because people thought that the volcano had now even surpassed God and that nobody can stop the volcano. Many people even believe that the devil lives inside the volcano. I can see that, you know, it gets very heated when you're in that situation. Of course, as a geologist, we believe that volcanoes are natural phenomena and that we need to understand them rather than personify them. But there was a lot of psychological problems in the aftermath. The local population was suffering, not only physically, but also mentally. So here's one of those situations where we have lava, and here's a burned car. And I like this picture so much because in my lectures I usually say, pahoihoi lava can make AA lava when it flows and cools. But we cannot make AA lava, we cannot make pahoihoi lava from AA lava because you need to reheat it. And this is the exception because just here, around the car, we have pahoihoi lava and the rest is AA lava. And the burning car was so hot that it reheated the lava. And therefore, I now stand corrected. You can make pahoihoi lava from AA lava, but you need a lot of heat for that. So here we have a burned car, and I think it's a spectacular example of how you can reheat lava. So let's talk a little bit more about the lava field. We have the lava field was expanding. The red area here was the initial lava from September 20th. That's the second day of the eruption. And then the lava field grew. And this pink arm here is one of the last lava flows from December 5th. This is the one that hit the cemetery. And this was, of course, considered very, very damaging. This is Montaña Todoque, I showed it earlier, and this is Montaña La Laguna. This is La Laguna village, and Todoque village is largely buried. So this is the evolution, and we went out there sampling quite consistently. We had a larger team, so I was not there the entire eruption. I was there several one-week spells. And this allowed us to sample lava over the course of the entire eruption. So this is us sampling lava. And on this occasion, we had a camera person from the BBC with us. But, well, we went out there kind of regularly. Whenever the lava came out, within a day or two, we tried to sample it. So this is the thickness map of the lava field. And the vent is, of course, very thick. But here in the central part of the lava field, we're reaching thicknesses of 70 meters. And that will mean that the lava will take years to cool. It's going to take a long time. The lava is thinner down here, and that's where the new road goes across. There, the heat is not so difficult, but you're not allowed to stop on that road, so, because the tarmac is warm, of course, from the heat from the lava. So the maximum eruption temperature was 1140 measured, and then we had 45 million cubic meters of pyroclastic material, and we had 188 million cubic meters of lava. And as I said, 70 meters is kind of one of the thick deposits there, and it goes even over 70 meters. Measured velocities is about 30 kilometers per hour, so it's pretty fast. And it was associated with earthquakes up to magnitude 5. So a little bit of geochemistry here. This is the sample suite we collected. We published this in 22 here in this paper by James Day and many of us. And here we see that there is a difference during the eruption. The first 10 days of the eruption here in blue had a very different composition than the rest of the eruption. And the change was quite rapid. And if you use the task diagram, then the first few days had a tephrite, and then later we had a basanite. This is also exemplified in the thin sections. So here is early lava from the 21st of September, and the crystals are very small. We even have strange minerals in there like reddish amphibole, while later in the eruptions, the crystals are pretty big and they're nice and euhedral. So our suspicion was that we had an early material coming from a more evolved magma reservoir, and then later we had some magma probably from a deeper source. Well, we have to test this, and if it's true, if this is from a shallower reservoir, more evolved, then it should have different isotope signals. We did some rhenium osmium isotopes, and indeed, early in the system, we have a more radiogenic signal, and that is usually only possible if your magmas interacted with some crustal rocks. Then these values become more radiogenic. So we had a good hint that indeed this magma may have come from higher up in the plumbing system, and this is from deeper down, maybe the mantle. And if we look at the seismics, this looks very convincing because we have two major seismic clusters. One is here in the crust mantle boundary area, and one is in the mantle. There's a bit of a discussion where exactly this reservoir sits. There's two groups. One group says it's between 30 and 40. Another group says it's between 20 and 30. For our purpose, that's not the key issue today, because either way, this would be in the mantle, this lower reservoir, and this is actually in the mantle crust transition. So this is the seismics against time, and this is when the eruption started. You can see that here when the magma was rising up. And initially, for the first 10 days, there was no deep earthquakes. They were all shallow. And that's very important because we said there was a difference in the chemistry. We had tephrite erupting right from the start, and later we had basanite. And indeed, we have this gap here. And that allows us to make this change in the magma composition. So initially, most likely, we had this shallower magma erupting, and then later we had deeper magma coming in. So very interesting because it's not just one magma soup, it's actually different pockets of magma that have been involved. So we did test this with fluid inclusions, and the fluid inclusions did confirm the deep storage, so we know that this works. And the fluid inclusions did not resolve the shallow system all that well, so we had to use a few other things. And this is where I started to think about if it's true that the shallow system has interacted with crust, it should sit in the old Jurassic Ocean crust I mentioned right at the beginning. And could we actually use this? Could we see the oxygen crust signal with geochemistry? So, and here is the unpublished data. I'm working on this right now. Here we have oxygen isotopes. This is what I showed earlier, the rhenium osmium, and here the oxygen isotopes. And indeed, the first 10 days give us a lot of spread, a large geochemical spread for oxygen isotopes, and then later it starts to become more flat. So, how can we explain this spread? Well, I had to go back all the way to my PhD, and here's the work we did, 20 odd years ago. Valentin and Troll, we looked at rocks under the Canary Islands at the ocean crust, and what we found is that the gabbros of the ocean crust, they have low oxygen isotope values because of the heat circulation, while the upper ocean crust has higher values. And therefore, the only real thing that we can use to make these values go down is actually the hot part of the ocean crust. And we therefore have a pretty good indication that the magma reservoir must have sat about here, because we have some lower values and a little bit of higher values. And this gives us a stratigraphic position for the magma chamber. So this is also consistent with the position here, because here we're sitting directly on the old Jurassic Ocean crust between 156 and 100, whatever that is, 150 million years. So we know that the old ocean crust is thick and it would have this stratigraphy. And in addition to that, the early lavas, I told you, have these weird minerals like reddish amphiboles. In addition to that, we also find a lot of little gabbro xenolith. Here's an SEM image, a scanning electron microscope image of one of those gabbro xenolith. And this gives us a good idea that the deep magma comes from the mantle, but the initial magma was sitting in the crust beneath the island, likely somewhere in the transition between the gabbros and the basalts and maybe even the sediments. And therefore, the oxygen isotopes confirm the seismics, and that complements the information. So we're getting a really good idea. If you are a geochemist, you want to know the mantle signal for the oxygen. And my advice is don't look at the first 2 weeks of eruptions, because they are often very compromised by these phenomena. But later in the eruption, it's very stable. And if you only look at that stable part, then my best estimate is that the mantle underneath the Palma has an oxygen isotope value of 5.3. And that's very useful if you want to do geochemical modeling. So this is the summary for La Palma. And just a very quick note, we're still working on some of this. From a hazard point of view, we are wondering how these two reservoirs, when they interact, would actually change the eruption patterns at the surface. And there's one problem here, and that is up here we have the earthquake intensity, the number of events, and you see that there was a large number of events, low, large, low, large, low, large, low, and this is a bit of an issue because the local people, they were feeling that the eruption might end very soon when there was less earthquakes, and they were hopeful. But then it started again, and it got weaker, and it started again. And here's a numerical model that we are working with. Here we have two reservoirs, and we're sending magma from one reservoir to the other. And then, of course, once the magma hits this shallow reservoir, you get pressure pulses. And we think that this is the reason for the intensity changes. The bad news is that if you have less earthquakes during an eruption with two reservoirs, you will likely have these changes. And this is not an indication that the eruption will stop. Here is also a little diagram looking at the shallow earthquakes and the deep earthquakes. And I had one of our geophysics colleagues to look at this. We are pretty confident that we can translate these events. So these two reservoirs were connected. It takes a few days from this to translate upwards. But here we're pretty confident that these two reservoirs were communicating by sending magma upwards. But each time a new pulse of magma arrives, it causes problems. Imagine you have a garden hose with some larger reservoirs in between. You can imagine that there is all sorts of complications, fluid dynamic complications, and therefore with this type of double reservoir eruption, we expect large fluctuations. It's not going to be linear, is my point here. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about Iceland now. That was the La Palma story. That's the perfect moment for having a sip of coffee. So we're going to Iceland now, to Fagradalsfjall first. And Fagradalsfjall, you've seen the images, spectacular eruption. And a word about Iceland. Iceland is, of course, built by volcanoes. It's active for the last 14 million years. The oldest rocks are on the blue ends, and the active zone is where the red material on the map is. And the Reykjanes volcanic belt is just about here. The Atlantic spreads with about 2 centimeters per year. It's very slow spreading compared to the Pacific. Pacific spreads with about 7 centimeters a year. But we also have a plume under the island of Iceland, because otherwise it wouldn't be above sea level. And here is a projection of the plume. And the plume sits probably on central Iceland, but it spreads likely in a mushroom fashion. And therefore, we think there's a plume influence all around the island, including the Reykjanes Peninsula. So the Reykjanes Peninsula continues into the ocean, into the mid-Atlantic spreading ridge. And it's actually not a simple spreading system. It's an oblique shear system. And you can see that here, all the volcanic areas, they're spread out. So we have this type of movement. And in this kind of situation, we open fissures, and the fissures will allow magma to rise up. It's likely more of a passive situation, where we open cracks and magma oozes out, rather than magma forcing its way through. So the eruption history of the Reykjanes can be divided into eruption periods and periods of seismic and volcanic inactivity. So here we have an eruption period, number 3. This goes back 1,000 years before our time calculation, and it was followed by about 1,000 years of inactivity. Here we had a few hundred years of activity again, and followed by a larger, about 1,000-year period of inactivity. Then again, another eruption period of a few hundred years, and then we had up to 900-something years of inactivity. And now Fagradalsfjall started, and Svartsengi started as well. So we are likely at the beginning of a new era of volcanic activity, and we're expecting more eruptions for many years to come. So this is, of course, a bit disconcerting, because it means we have to get ready for a larger volcanic cycle there. So if the past is the key to the future, then we are in for more eruptions. And the predictions right now is that we will have another eruption in Iceland probably in the next 4 weeks. So it's building up right now, and we're expecting the next one. And the biggest worry that we currently have is, could there be multiple eruptions along the peninsula? And is there a big magma system under the entire peninsula or not? But I'll come back to this a little later. So let's summarize the eruption activity. In March 21, we had the Geldingadalen Valley opening up in the early evening, and a 700-meter long fissure started to erupt. This fissure erupted until April, and then several new craters formed, and then once they started to outpour lava, they started to also decrease, and eventually one of the vents became the dominant vent. So here is a little map. Here's the vent alignment, first vent, second vent, fourth, three, and again you see they're jumping. This is the problem with fissure eruptions. They're not progressive, they're jumpy. There's statistically no reason why they should form an alignment. So the problem with fissure eruptions is they go backwards and forwards. There's a random element, unfortunately. So this is the fissure early on, and here you see vent 1 in the foreground, vent 2 in the background, and then vent 3, etc. And note this little vent here, vent number 5. And let me show you vent number 5 at the end of the eruption. Vent number 5 has become the biggest of the vents. And this is a good analogy. I always say to my students, you may not be the brightest or most successful person at the beginning of your career, but you can catch up. So vent number 5 is a good example for this. Vent number 5 is also the one who had the biggest topographic changes here. Here's the elevation, as you would expect from this kind of system. So this is vent number 5, and here we have a beautiful lava lake, and the lava lake was building up and erupting, and then it was subsiding and building up, and in summer of 21, this was almost cyclic. It was beautiful to watch, and the eruption was in a remote area. Many tourists came there to watch the eruption. There was no settlement in the area, and it was really what some people call a Disneyland eruption. You could go there and enjoy. So here we have a drone view into the lava lake of vent 5, and a spectacular lava crust, and there's just new lava pushing up. And eventually the lava was so much that it spread from this valley here, Geldingadalen, into Meradalia, and also into this valley, NATHAGI. And here was a big worry, because if that would continue, it would cut off the road. So people were really worried. They started to make barriers here, and funnily enough, the lava just stopped in front of the barrier. Everybody was disappointed, but it was a really good exercise, because, as we'll show for 2024, the lava barrier concept became really important. It was a very good practice exercise, because now the lava barriers are saving the village and the power plant. I'll come to this in a minute. So here we have the lava arriving in the NATHAGI Valley, and the NATHAGI Valley is very sheltered. NATHAGI actually means the night pastures. That's where you bring your sheep for the night, because it's so safe. But once the lava arrived in the valley, I think it wasn't a good place for sheep anymore. And here's a little sequence. Could you get me the video going of the NATHAGI Valley? So now you see it inflating. There's actually lava flowing under the crust, not on top of it anymore. And degassing helps as well. And there you see the lava coming out from inside. And of course it's Iceland, so it's raining. So this was the filling of NATHAGI, and it's quite spectacular. As you saw, there was a lot of tourists there as well. So the authorities did not lock the area off. And we had a little bit of wildfires. Here you see burned areas of moss, but overall it wasn't too bad. So, oops, let's go here. But once the eruption stopped in 21, everything seemed fine and over. But just about a year later, in August, the next valley was affected. This is early. This is August 2nd, and here we have a fissure again, and there's eruption along the fissure. Here's some vents, and the fissure was cracking into the mountain. But eventually, this area became the dominant vent, and it looked like this. And this is the fissure end, and there at the fissure end, we have the initial baby volcano that never grew big, and the big volcano is actually here on the other side. So this is the little baby volcano that did not get covered, and you can still go there. Now it's covered in sulfur, unfortunately, but this was a little spatter volcano on the fissure that didn't grow big. And the final eruption was actually along the main sinter cone, and of course this is us trying to sample here and enjoying ourselves. The equipment was a little improvised at the beginning, but we got better as we go along. So, and we had these wonderful situations here. This is actually the 21 lava, and when you see where the new lava was coming, you realize, oh, this lava will be buried very soon. So you go there quickly and take another sample before the new lava arrives, and then you take a break, and then a little later the new lava comes. And then you take a sample from the new lava. So you get 2 years sampled with one trip. So it's quite effective. And this is how it looks then when the new lava covers the old lava. So, and of course, as I said, we were sampling away. This was very efficient when we had situations like this. Here we have the 22 lava reaching on new ground. There was a few places where it didn't cover it. And here, spectacular how it brings in boulders from the subsurface. So here we have a lithic clast picked up by the lava, and this is the furthest extent of the 22 lavas. This is actually right here at this place. So a year later, another eruption ensued, and that was the Litli Rutur eruption. So this was Geldingadalje 21, this was Meradalje 22, and Litli Rutur was up here. You see, it's all aligned in this way. This was the vent, and the lava was flowing down here, and eventually the lava was starting to cover all the lavas from 22 and 21, but for most part, the 23 lava is actually on pristine ground, i.e. it's not covering all the lava. So this is the Litli Rutur cone, and this was early in the eruption, and this was later in the eruption. You see where we had open ground, suddenly we had these lava ponds here and lava flows, and the entire area is now covered with the lava field. So here is another video, and this is how it looks from the surface. You see these sporadic fire fountains, these bursts, but you have very little idea how it looks in reality, and the drones reveal it. It's actually a boiling vent, so there's a boiling lava lake inside. It looks, you know, reasonably peaceful from here, just a poof, but actually it's really violent inside the vent. So, and a few more shots. Here we have the 23 lava going over 21 lava. It's reasonably slow, so you can watch it, you can walk away, it's not too dangerous. And here we have younger lava spreading on fresh surfaces. And there's a major wall of lava. This was coming in 23 on the 21 lava. Here we have a beautiful situation. This is 21 lava, this is 23 lava, and this is 22 lava. And this lava was migrating towards this. And here's a larger image. So here it went a little further. And eventually this lava was actually going over that lava. And that meant there was one place here where we had 21, 22, 23 in the right order, but only one place. And this makes you think, when we look at lava stacks, old lava stacks, how many of those are actually mixed up and how many are in proper stratigraphic order? Something to think about. If you look at stratigraphy and lava stratigraphy and things are changing and jumping, maybe you actually had different lobes coming in at different times. So what looks like flat horizons in lava mountains may actually be a lot more complicated. But here is the three of us standing proud at the place where all the three lavas are above each other. And so this is only one place, exactly this place here. And well, we look like as if we shot a lion. We're very proud to be there, but of course we didn't. So here are a few more impressions of lava sampling. As I said, initially it was a bit improvised, and we sampled a lot of rock. Eventually we got a donation of safety suits from a steel company, and this was a real game changer. Not for the sampling, but suddenly we got a lot of media interest. We got 90 million views on YouTube by now, just because of the suits. The sampling was the same. So, but it looks really cool, doesn't it? So everybody loved it on YouTube, and you feel like an astronaut. So, but of course, all the suits do is they reflect the heat, so you can stay at the lava a little longer. And if there's a blip of magma or so, or lava, it doesn't burn you. So it's actually quite useful, but it's a lot of trouble to put it on. But you know what you do for likes. So, now a bit of geochemistry. There's a lot of plots here, so I'll run you through them. Similar to La Palma, we see an initial change here, and then it flattens out. And this is true for many of the parameters, trace elements, major elements, and this is very intriguing. So again, we were thinking about what's going on. We concluded that there must have been different sources early in the eruption, the first 20 days, and then a different source later in the eruption. The early lavas were more depleted, and the later lavas were more enriched. So if you look at this diagram here, this goes back to Fitten et al. The blue lavas are from early in the eruption, and the yellow ones from later. And we're moving more towards the OIB field. We're getting more chemically enriched. So there is indeed a change here. And this is, of course, true for the other parameters here as well. Here's niobium, zirconium, for example. And here we see this change. So we have a higher resolution here. And initially, people were interpreting this as different mantle reservoirs being tapped. There's different mantle end members, and you can calculate mixtures between them. And initially, it seemed that we had mantle end members more down here, and later more up here. The yellow ones are the later lavas. But I'll give you a little bit of a caveat later, because these workers, Halderson et al., they noted early on that the eruptions tend away from everything that's been measured on the Reykjans before. So something is very strange. And they argued it's a mantle problem, but we are a bit skeptical about that. We're actually thinking this may be also, like in La Palma, a crustal problem. But let's look at this a little further. We went to do oxygen isotopes to see whether we can resolve this. And here we are. So this is the oxygen isotopes. We have low oxygen isotopes in central Iceland, but here at the Reykjanes Peninsula, we have very normal oxygen isotopes, very similar to the Reykjanes Ridge and to the Atlantic Morb. In fact, it's completely flat. There's maybe a little bit of variation early on, but the oxygens did not really resolve anything. We published this paper in June 22, saying that the oxygen is not variable, and if it's really different mantle end members, they're certainly not different in oxygen. As soon as we published this, a few weeks later, the eruptions came again at Meradalia, and of course, most people then asked me, so what happened to the oxygen afterwards? And the answer is, it's still flat. This is unpublished data, this is published data, so we're writing this up right now, and here it's still pretty flat, so no real change. So this test failed, but it gave us some other indication. So what else can we do to test this? Well, we did some barometry, and this is from clinopyroxene. And first of all, there's very little water in these magmas, but the barometry suggests about 5 to 2 kilobars of crystallization depth, and that is not in the mantle. The mantle starts down here in Iceland, in this part of Iceland, so we are in the crust, lower to mid-crust. And that's very intriguing. If you want magma to come from the mantle, you would expect the crystals to have grown in the mantle. But that's not quite what it is. So initially our model was that we may have had a reservoir in the upper part of the lower crust, maybe a little bit above the mantle, and some pockets early on to explain the eruptions of the first 2 weeks or 2-3 weeks. But it's also not quite true, because eventually we did osmium isotopes, and the first 2 weeks are going crazy again in osmium. Not in oxygen, but in osmium. And again, these values indicate that we must have some radiogenic crust involved. So these are in fact the highest osmium isotope ratios of any recent eruptions in Iceland. So this is quite a severe observation, and it requires us to have magma sitting in the crust up there. So this model is not bad, but it's also not perfect. And a little later, after the eruptions at Fagradalsfjall stopped in 21, a new eruption series started in this place here called Svartsengi, along a fracture system that's referred to as Sundnukur, and this is this area here. So Fagradalsfjall is over here, and suddenly in late 23, a new eruption cycle started here at Svartsengi, and here we have some bulging of the crust. While this was remote, this area is populated. So there is a power plant here, there is a village here, there's a major road here, and the Blue Lagoon, the major tourist attraction in Iceland, is also there. Suddenly, the eruptions got very serious. What was a tourist Disney eruption suddenly was actually a real problem. And in early 24, we had a crack opening up, sending lava into the town of Grindavik. And what was happening then is that the Icelanders, they built lava barriers, lava dams around Grindavik and around the power plant. And here you see the lava coming, flowing along the barrier, and they're just closing the last gaps before the lava arrives. And this is what they're doing right now. They're building more lava dams because there's a new eruption likely to happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So here's the timeline, and initially we had these 3 eruptions, and they were quite spaced out, and they were in a remote area. But now we have bang, 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 a quick series of eruptions. Actually, I haven't even added all of them because it was so quick, and we're expecting another one. And not only is it faster, the volumes are bigger as well. So we have more. It's faster and bigger. And this is what we anticipate to go on likely for quite some time. So, and by now it's reached the outer parts of the Blue Lagoon. This is the parking area of the Blue Lagoon, and this is the lava barrier. The Blue Lagoon and the power plant are behind the barrier. But, well, let's see if they can raise the barriers faster than the lava arriving. So, this is the lava field from Fagradalsfjall. This is the Sundnukur lava field, and by now it's actually gone around Grindavik. This is not the latest map. Here's the latest map, and here you see the lava has gone down, and these red ones are the barriers, the lava barriers. And the lava barrier has basically saved the town on several occasions, here and here. So it's surprisingly effective. There's a bit of a worry that when the lava reaches this pond here, we might get some phreatic explosions. But let's see about that. So far, the lava has not reached the coast yet. Here's a few impressions. There's a whole cohort of trucks and diggers ready to build the lava. The roads are left open when the lava comes. They close these kind of barriers very quickly to allow traffic before the lava arrives. So this is the Blue Lagoon, and Grindavik is just behind that hill here. And this is the spa area with the power plant of Svartsengi, and the power plant supplies electricity and warm water to the main international airport at Keflavik. So if this power plant was to stop, we would have a serious problem. So, and as I showed before, this is the lava arriving at the Blue Lagoon, and the first buildings are burning. So here we have some impressions from the lava that went into the town of Grindavik, and it stopped there just about at this fence. Very peculiar situation. The wooden fence was not burned because this lava was already cold. So here we have one of these houses that got affected by the tectonics. The house here is bent, as you can see. It's a tilted house. And there's a little video here. Let's see if we can get this to work. Hello, hello, I'm here in Grindavik, and I'm just looking at the various damages. We have it July now, 24. This is from earlier this year, and here you see the road has been filled in. The crack that went through the road has been filled in, and there is a metal bridge over it now, but the cracks continue, of course, beyond the road. These are cracks that come due to dike intrusion, but also due to tectonic movement, and there's a building here, and of course the building is affected as well. So here you are, a big crack in the building, and over there is another one. There's a few smaller secondary cracks here as well. Let me get a little closer. So you can just about see them here. I think there's two parallel cracks here, and they meet up with the main crack over there. And of course, these things are barely fixable. This building has probably permanent damage. Hopefully, some of these things can be salvaged nevertheless. Okay, thank you very much, and all the best. Hello. So, and this is another video. This is the hottest road I ever driven on. Yeah, can you do that? So this is the new lava road, and you must never stop on this. Volcano, or is it two volcanoes? So these are very important questions, and I put up these three hypotheses here. And that is that hypothesis one, we have a reservoir in the upper mantle that feeds all of these things. This was the initial outer down here, and then the idea that Sindemanadal and our things came up with this. Maybe we have different pockets to explain the different type of material, but we also have influx from the mantle, but this would be a more complicated plumbing system than partly branching and wouldn't require the same amount of magma, would be less severe than this. And judging from previous work in the area, some people postulated there could be a large system under the entire Radiant Peninsula that could supply several of those older systems. If this is true, then we actually have magma under the capital of Radiant. And that would be very disconcerting. So you don't want to have magma under your capital. So this was important to find out. So the first thing we did is we tested whether the chemistry of the lava could change. And here we have the variation, major elements, trace elements, and we have this initial change. I showed you before. In red is now the first part of the magma, and they seem to be of the same thing. Good news. It seems to be one volcano, not two. So big relief. And when you look at the minerals, this is laser ablation data on olivines. There's different types of olivines. So this is the pattern of gentle olivines. And here we have the sparkling things, the finger, and here they even overlap. The pink ones are the ground force, the red ones are the bigger crystals, and here there seems to be a continuation. So the minerals would also imply that we are talking about the same matter. So, great news. But then we need to also ask, if you have a problem somewhere, you are going to the doctors and they send you for a CT scan, or a computer tomography scan, and if the Earth has a problem, we do a seismic scan, if you will, we do a seismic tomography. And I was talking to my colleagues in Uppsala, there was a few smart geophysicists, and they did this seismic tomography. this been a game changer because we find an anomaly down here. Below this level, the resolution gets down a little, but we find this anomaly here. Here we have different slices, and this anomaly gives us that. Oh, of course. Sorry, I forgot. So, yeah. Apologies. Let me go back actually one slide. I forgot the microphone. So here we were testing whether the lava chemistry is continuous. IPTG-ITB is in red here. The older eruptions from Fagradalsfjall are in blue, green, and yellow. And it seems that we have the same trend continuing. So the good news is from the chemistry, it looks like the same lava and therefore the same volcano. When we look at the mineral data, this is trace elements in olivine, there is good overlap and continuation. So we are pretty confident initially it was the same lava and therefore it implies one volcano rather than two. So when we want to find out what's going on inside a human body, we do a computer tomography. And when we want to find out what's going on inside the Earth, we do a seismic tomography. And I have some productive colleagues in Uppsala, geophysics colleagues, and they worked on this seismic tomography. And this has been really, really instructive because we have a larger anomaly here at about 9 to 12 kilometers depth. This resolution lower down breaks down a little, but the mantle is only really at about, well, 15 or deeper, and that means this reservoir sits in the crust. So it's not coming from the mantle, it comes from the crust, and there is earthquake swarms, that's the little dots here. They go up to Fagradalsfjall, and another set of earthquakes go up here to IPTG-ITB, and this is the inflation system that we see right now. The current eruptions are fed by this little reservoir, and this is what inflates and deflates and inflates and deflates, and that's causing the eruptions here, but it's also fed from this reservoir down here. The good news about seismic tomography is you can make a calculation of how much magma is in there. From the VP-VS ratios, you can calculate the amount of liquid and solid, and we did that. And there is a typo there. It's actually not 50,000 cubic kilometers. It should be 50 cubic kilometers. Apologies. I wanted to type it out in cubic meters first, but then the number got too long, and then I didn't correct it. Sorry. So my fault, but you get the idea. So we have 50 cubic kilometers of magma down there, and well, that's a good amount, but it's not huge. So the good news is there's not enough magma to flood Reykjavik. So, but will we have more eruptions? Yes, most likely. So this is the result of that, and we have one major system sitting in the crust, and this explains the initial crustal contamination in the isotopes, and now we're feeding new magma in. And how will this continue? Well, here's the more geochemical data from the Sundnúkar-Svartsengi area, now in red and pink. And we see some changes now. So the magnesium is going down now, the nickel is going down now, the chromium is going down now, the magma is becoming more evolved. And that means we're not seeing a lot of new magma, we see magma that's changing, likely in the crust. So again, that's actually good news. So, and here we also did more oxygen isotopes, and if the magma sits in the crust, it should assimilate more crust, and the value should change, and indeed we seem to have a mild trend towards lower oxygen, and this is typical for the crust in Iceland to have some lower oxygen values, and that means we now see magma that's been residing in the crust for some time, and it's not necessarily a new pulse of magma. So we're understanding the system better, but we will still have to face more eruptions. So coming back to the model, this was the initial idea that we have a reservoir deep and we're feeding it all the way up from the mantle. And this is unfortunately no longer sustainable. This, I believe, is wrong. It's a very nice model, and I'm very sad to see it die. but we cannot sustain it anymore with the new data. This model wasn't bad. It was a good attempt for the time to explain it, but it's also not perfect. So we have to be a little skeptical about our early model as well. The reality is, I think it looks more like this. And here we have a complicated reservoir system, a plumbing system, likely with multiple pockets. This was my hypothesis. And actually, the reality is not so bad. I was quite chuffed how close we were. So here we have one major reservoir, maybe something deeper, but we cannot resolve this, and some smaller pockets high up, and they can feed this. So it's a complicated plumbing system, but it's a single plumbing system. So we published this later this year, and this got picked up by people in CNN. I suggest you read this paper, not that paper, because the media is always distorting it a little. But I think we have a good answer now for the dimensions of the magma system. So coming back to these three hypotheses, these was the models we started with, and it's this one here that I think is most realistic and that I suggest to be the working model for the upcoming eruptions. So I think there's reasons to stay positive despite the bad situation, because the magma system is not so big and Reykjavik is not directly in danger, neither is the airport. However, the Svartsengi power plant is in danger, and so is Grindavik town. So this cannot be changed right now. Let me sum up. What have we learned? Well, high-resolution temporal sampling of rift eruptions, they reveal considerable changes in La Palma as well as in Iceland. There's evidence for early crustal storage, and early eruptions are likely magmas that have been sitting in the crust for some time. So we need to be a bit careful or mindful. Sorry, there's a typo. We need to be a little careful with assigning everything to the mantle, because detailed work reveals that initial lava eruptions may not have come from the mantle. So although both La Palma and Iceland are plume-related, there is no anomalously low oxygen found when filtering the data carefully, and that means we can determine with significant certainty the oxygen isotope composition of the mantle in those areas. We have also learned that multi-reservoir magma supply systems are a bit messy, so the eruption products are complicated to read. And at present, it seems, however, that we have one plumbing system for both La Palma as well as for the Reykjans. For La Palma, we are expecting more eruptions, but the frequency is very low. Statistically, there's a 50% chance for another eruption in the next 50 years, but there we have a very high population density. Iceland will likely have more frequent eruptions, but the population density is much lower. But we have infrastructure, and infrastructure is always going to be a problem because we cannot move it. And the bitter lesson here is that rifts don't care what we put on top of it. So we need to be careful to assess the geology first before we build more power plants and things like that, because the real problem is that we put things there, not that the volcano erupts. The volcano was there all along, and humans have a slightly distorted perception of this. So it's our job to understand the volcano and be careful with it, rather than blaming the volcano for destroying the things we carelessly put in its way. So I'd like to close with this last video. Can I have a little click here? This is from spring last year. This is now Svartsengi lava. So, I say thank you for your attention, and I hope you found this useful.
Okay, thank you very much, Val, for your presentation. Once more, please give a huge applause for him. in Bahasa we got a let's see what that we got things to call that one daging. You know that, right? Everything's the literal means everything is meat. I mean, like it's the point. Every presentation, every slide you show is have a certain point that we can learn from. Okay, and we've learned a lot of things, and then mainly we learn about what can we get if we study lava, for example. We can get a new information about Earth's interior, right? And then we can also study about plate tectonics. And then the most important thing is we can probably gain new information about hazard. Not that necessarily mean we can forecast the hazard, but well, I mean we can mitigate by, for example, like we built a dam and for redirecting the flow of the lava, for example, and then other things. And then things also we learned that sampling for a volcano in a volcanic area can be dangerous. So we have to, let's say, keep the procedure safe, okay? And then things that I learned from him as a lecturer, we got new extra jokes, right? To iceberg. That's things that I pick up from him. It's a good thing. And then we also learn. Probably we don't have any chances to visit there yet. I mean, like a lot of places, La Palma, and then I learned a lot of new names actually, like Fajafal, Meradalia, and Geldingadari, like things like that. Learn a lot of things, and then we know that previously probably we don't know that places exist, but now we know that from that place, we can explain how that eruption occurs, and then processes beneath the volcano itself. I think that's what I learned. Probably you guys learn more things than I do, and then we can now we can start the discussion. For the audience in the online meeting, you can raise your hand or you can write your question. But firstly, I will give a opportunity for the participant present in this room first. If you have any question, you can ask. You can say your name. You can say your name first, and then you can ask the question. Please, if anyone have a question.
I'm I am Andri, formerly rector in economic geology deposit here in ITB. So it's easy question. How far from the lava have you taken the video?
2 meters. 2 meters.
Yes. How? 2?
2 meters.
Just 2 meters?
The video is from 2 meters, but we also sampled the lava with a scoop.
Oh.
A little bit early on the presentation, I showed us with a steel scoop, so you have to.
It's not too hot for you?
It's a little warm sometimes. Just a little.
How many degrees is that? 1,000?
1150 degree.
1100, yeah. 1150 degree.
So if you touch it, you will burn.
Oh.
So you must not touch it.
Yes.
So one of my French colleagues at the eruption, we took some lava and we put it aside and we let it cool down. And usually we put water on it, but somehow somebody forgot to put water on one of the rocks. And she started to put the rocks that had been cooled into the bags, but one of them was not cooled. She had to go to hospital afterwards. So you cannot touch it. It's too hot, clearly. But you can go there for a little while, and with these protective suits, you can actually stay there for several minutes. So these reflective suits, these astronaut suits, they help to reflect the heat away from you. But is it dangerous? Yes. On the other side, it's rather slow moving. So you should not stumble. That would be dangerous. But if you stand there 2 meters away, it's okay for a few minutes.
It is not dangerous also by gas, maybe a poison gas?
We have gas meters with us, and they are low down on the leg, and they will give you an alarm if there's too much gas. They make a really unpleasant sound, and you have to immediately leave the area. And we do this on the leg because CO2 is the problem, because that collects in depressions. And if you're going down and you're not getting air, that's where people die. That's the most common.
There is also CO2 here?
There is CO2 here. And
Why CO2 here?
all magma has CO2.
Okay.
And it's just sometimes more and sometimes less. In subduction zones, it's a bit more. But in these systems, it's a little less. But it's still CO2. And CO2 is denser than air. You create these gas traps. If you have a little valley or depression, the CO2 will collect there. And that's where you don't want to go. This is very dangerous also in areas where you have CO2, like in Italy or in fact in Tenerife, where you have CO2 in the basement of houses. People go down in the basement and they can't breathe anymore. CO2 has no smell. You cannot detect it. You just get tired and you fall over, and that's it.
Okay.
So this is why you must have a gas meter,
because
it tells you beep, 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 beep. It's not a safe place, and you must immediately leave when that happens. You can use a gas mask, but the gas mask only protects you from SO2, from acidic gas. The gas mask cannot make oxygen. If you have more CO2 in the air and your oxygen is low, you will still die, even if you have a gas mask. So this is something you need to be very keenly aware. This is the biggest danger. And in the Canary Islands, for example, 3 people died in the last 2 eruptions, all 3 from gas. One was a photographer who was doing photos like this. The other one was a fisherman who wanted to pick up dead fish from the lava flow. He wanted to make a snatch, but he got too close and there was too much gas, probably also with the seawater. And in 21, there was one person that died, but he snuck into the exclusion zone without permit, and he went to the house of his daughter to check. But then he was found the next day dead, and most likely he either had a heart attack or it was a gas problem. The authorities were suddenly, within a day, super strict about gas equipment. So I think this person died from gas as well. So the gas is a key issue, but we as workers can protect ourselves with a gas meter, having it low down on the body, and a gas mask that reduces the acidic fumes to a certain degree. It's not 100% safe, but it's reasonably safe. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So another question. What is the difference between Hawaii and this area, Iceland, in tectonic and regional? Because we say that Hawaii is a hotspot, hotspot system. Is that also a hotspot system in this area?
Yes. The 2 examples I showed today are both hotspots, La Palma and Iceland, but Iceland has the added complication of sitting on a ridge system, on a mid-Atlantic ridge. So we have a spreading system coupled with a hotspot. People discuss, of course, is the hotspot there because it finds the spreading system? I don't know. Some people argue maybe the plume was there first and caused the spreading system, but the spreading ridge goes through the entire Atlantic. I don't think only I can do it. So I think it's more that the plume in Iceland has found a weak spot and is coming up there. But in Iceland, we have this combination. And that's reflected in the chemistry. The lavas on La Palma are typical OIB, ocean island basalt, very alkaline like Hawaii. But in Iceland, we have mildly alkaline and usually more primitive and morp-like signatures. So there we have a stronger influence from the spreading center, but the plume signal is also there. But it's not as strong because the magmas get more diluted because we have this combination. But both are plume systems or hotspot systems in the wider sense, like Hawaii.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, as summary, okay, let's say you guys understand, right? So I don't have to make a summary for that. Well, for the first question, probably but equipment, we talk about gases and then a possible hazard that fatality probably could happen if you only using an equipment that what Val said make a sound like beep, beep, beep. That's only for sulfur, right?
No, it
for
warns about all the gases.
All the gases.
It can detect all the gases, but the gas.
But for the mask, it's from sulfur only. But
Yes.
for carbon dioxide or for carbon monoxide, probably it's better if you are not sure about that. Don't get closer, okay? And then for the next question, a difference between the Iceland and then the Hawaiian. Probably they say similar a pattern, but in Iceland, let's say they have a plum and then they have a crustal, let's say contamination or rift, fissure. Okay, things like they get a enriched, right, for the composition that mildly alkaline.
That's right. Yes. In the
Okay.
southern part of Iceland, it's mildly alkaline, but overall, it's not as alkaline as Hawaii, or Canary Islands, because that's pure plume systems, and here we have a combined plume and mid-Atlantic spreading center system.
Okay, thank you. Any more question? I mean, like we still have like the whole day, right, for question and answer.
And the night is.
Guys, come on. If you have any question, sure, please.
I think he knows my name. But yeah, for the other audience. Okay, my name is Nadira. I'm from Politeknik of Geology and Mining IGP. I would like to ask both La Palma and Iceland is a plume setting, but one is sitting on a moving plate and the other one is on rifting.
Correct.
So is there any possibilities, because in La Palma there's also landslide, like the landslide of the flank of the volcano like in Indonesia. But it's because there's a lot of movement on the plates. But in Iceland, the movement is rifting. Is it also possible for volcano in Iceland to have these types of landslides on the flank of the volcano? Thank you.
Thank you. That's an interesting question. I mean, in theory, all volcanoes that grow too rapidly or develop internal instability can collapse. Some of the larger stratovolcanoes like Hekla or so can collapse. But it's less common there. And with ocean islands, like in La Palma, the slow plate movement allows to build up tall edifices. And these tall edifices are more likely to then degrade and collapse. And in Iceland, it's a more widespread system. But there is no real reason to suggest that there can't be landslides in Iceland, but they would be likely less big and stratovolcanoes. There can also be some coastal submarine landslides. We see this in Hawaii quite frequently. There's these submarine landslides. This can happen everywhere. So this could happen around the coast of Iceland, but then that would likely not affect Iceland itself. It would rather potentially cause an earthquake or a tsunami that spreads away. But this is a very infrequent situation, I would think. But principal answer, yes, Iceland can have landslides as well. But the ones in the Canaries are a lot cooler, I think.
Okay, I think that's clear enough. Is there any more question? Or I will ask question. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, guys. Or the audience in the online meeting, you guys have any question? Okay. State your name first and then your question.
My name is Putu Ayu. I'm from Pascasarjana University. Professor, you said about boundaries. Maybe it's like related to mitigation in Iceland. I'm interested with that, how it's work. It's like new for them, or they used to do the boundaries since long time ago in lava. In Iceland. No, the barriers, the boundaries. Yes,
the barriers or berms, as they often are called. Yeah, well, it's basically an earth wall. It's basically a pile of earth. They even use lava that erupted last year already for protecting it against the lava from this year. So they take everything that there is and they build these large dams. Yeah. Now, Iceland has tried to combat lava flows for a long time. There was the 1973 eruption on the island of Heimaey, and their lava was going into the harbor of Heimaey. And there they sprayed water on the lava. So they're hoping to stop the lava. Well, the problem with that is that if the lava is pushing from behind, it doesn't make a huge difference whether you spray water on the front of it. If the lava is about to stop, this can have an effect, but it's likely a bit of a myth. But lava barriers, this was actually tried in several places. I think in Italy it was tried as well, with mixed success. But when they did the tests at Fagradalsfjall, they realized they can do it, first of all, and they have no other option. The only thing you can do is try to build a wall. You know, this is what politicians do as well. So you know what I'm trying to say. So the issue is, if you want to stop some movement across this boundary, you have to build a protective device. And this is what they do. The problem is they are not entirely safe. In early 24, a fissure opened inside the lava barrier, and there's nothing you can do. This is when the village of Grindavik got damaged. Another problem is the lava presses against the barriers, and sometimes they collapse. Yeah. Sometimes also the barriers made of rock have a permeability, and lava can creep through. Yeah. And then suddenly you have a little lava river on the other side. Yeah. So all of these phenomena are there, but overall, the protective barriers have been surprisingly successful. If you go to my YouTube channel, you can see some videos of us with a jeep on top of the lava barrier. It's pretty cool.
I will subscribe it.
Yeah. And the lava barriers are a relatively effective way to deal with the lava, and it's affordable, although Iceland spent a lot of money with this. But the big question is it worth it? And the good news is it helps, but can the village and the power plant be saved in the long run? Well, we don't know, because if this continues, if we have many more eruptions, there comes a point where it becomes too costly to do this. So, and there may well be voices that say, stop it. It's just lost. On the other side, the harbor in Grindavik is really good. It's in a really very well working, very sheltered, very productive fishery harbor, and the Icelandic people do not want to lose that. So one option I see is that Grindavik may become a fishing station rather than an active village. So a fishing station is less problematic. If the volcano erupts, you go with a boat somewhere else. But if you live there with your children and family and the volcano erupts at night, that's very dangerous. So I think it might become more like an industrial area for fishing and other things rather than an area where people live. But we will have to see. If the eruptions stop soon, this maybe can be fixed. But if they don't stop, I think the village is lost. And 4,000 people have been living there. The government has now offered people to buy their houses. So you can sell your house to the government and buy somewhere else, and many people are doing this. But of course, some people say, this is my home, I want to be here. Whether this is sensible or not, we discussed this at Merapi. Some people don't want to evacuate because they feel close, and then they die. So it's not a very good situation. We need to balance these things, unfortunately. And we have similar problems in Hawaii. Lava flows that were destroying several populated areas. The government now said in Hawaii, we buy your houses, but if you don't sell, you have no right for permits, you have no right for water, you have no right for modifications or electricity. As long as it works, it's fine, but when there is a problem, you are on your own. So they are forcing people to sell. You still have the option of not selling, but the consequences are severe. So you effectively have to choose a life off-grid. Then you can still stay there. But it's very dangerous having people in these areas. And in the Canary Islands, usually what they do is they declare these areas as national parks. National park sounds like you're protecting nature, but actually you're protecting people from nature. So that's a huge thing. It sounds great, but it's actually very dangerous.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, we have one person raising the hand. Firman, I guess. Still there, Firman? You can ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you, Jananda. My name Firman Sauki. I'm from Doctoral Program of Geological Engineering, ITB. Hi, Lofal. It's great to reconnect with you after a long time, and I really appreciate your insightful presentation. I hope we'll have the chance to meet at IGEN sometime soon. I have two questions for you. First, as we've discussed before, that assimilation play a crucial role in magmatic dynamic because we cannot assume that the crust is homogeneous, but in reality it's heterogeneous. I want to ask about how far accurately we can now model and quantify the assimilation process below the volcano. This is my first question. And the second question is, how much do we currently understand about the role of specific tectonic setting, like you present about the mid-oceanic ridge in Iceland or hotspot in Canary Island, to more complex magma in subduction zone like in Indonesia? And are there any recent breakthroughs that help us to predict how these factors interact to produce distinct rock types in specific tectonic setting? Thank you.
Thank you, Firman. Good to hear from you. Yes, I hope to be at Gen in about September. I'm really keen to catch up with you there. But to answer your first question, the crust is not homogeneous, and in the La Palma case, I was trying to bring that in with the different layers there. The modeling is always dependent on the choices you make, what end members you take, and what compositional spectrum you choose. But there is now very good software. There is like the magma chamber simulator, and this allowed you to base your modeling on thermodynamic constraints, and this is actually getting better and better. Is it perfect? Probably not. Is it a good approximation? Yes, you can test whether this composition is a more likely assimilant than that composition. And here, using, for example, the oxygen, we can say it has to be more gabbros than the lavas. So we're getting better at this. But there's still a lot more work done to fully quantify this. Concerning your second question, unfortunately, you broke up a little, and I couldn't quite hear the second question so well.
Okay, I get the question. Well, how is the actual role of tectonics, in your opinion, in generating different types of volcano type, and then the rock produce? I think that's the question.
Of course, the tectonic setting is crucial here, because when we compare, for example, plume or ridge settings with subduction zone settings, subduction zones have usually pretty high magma production rates and high melting rates in the mantle because of the water that's coming down with the subduction plate, and this will melt the mantle, and this makes very water-rich magmas. This also then helps with differentiation, with fractionation, and therefore magmas in subduction zones tend to be a lot more explosive than, for example, magmas in ocean island settings or in standard oceanic rift settings. If you have continental rifts, like in East Africa, then you have a crust, and there the magma can get stuck, differentiate, assimilate, and then things get also more felsic and potentially also a little bit more explosive. But the Ring of Fire, as you know, is a very explosive system where we have many dangerous stratovolcanoes with silicic or felsic composition. This is less so in, for example, the Canary Islands. In Iceland, we do have some large silicic volcanoes, but overall, the production rate is lower. The biggest eruptions we know, supervolcanoes, they are all in subduction zones. This is, for example, Toba in Sumatra, Taupo in New Zealand, and Yellowstone in the north of the US. All of these large cities.
Two questions is the trigger of the eruption.
we can anticipate some potential triggers. One possibility is, of course, new magma arriving, and I think this is when we see this change between the initial eruption material that was sitting in the crust to the later deeper material. So in many of those cases, we have new magma pushing up, but this pushing can be starting weeks and months and potentially years prior to an eruption. Another issue is, of course, tectonic movements. In Iceland, we have a lot of tectonic movements. They can open up cracks and allow an eruption. And the final one is that if magma sits for long enough, it will start to crystallize. And many early crystals do not contain a lot of volatiles. Olivine, pyroxene, they're dry minerals. They don't contain water. And if we separate them out, the remaining magma will become more volatile rich. And that can trigger an eruption once we have so much gas in the system that we exceed the pressure, or the confining pressure, we can also initiate an eruption. So these are my best guesses.
And then one more question from Aisha. What do you think about the relationship of the eruption and the rift system in the Iceland? And I was going to explain a little bit more about future eruption.
Yes, absolutely. The Icelandic eruptions are comparatively harmless because they are not producing big explosions or eruption columns. The situation in La Palma was different. The eruption column was 6 kilometers or sometimes even 8 kilometers. We have not seen that in Iceland in the Reykjanes eruptions. There we have some fire fountains. They may go up 100, 200 meters, but not more. The Iceland rifting is the main reason. And I think we had this major tectonic event in November last year. And this then led to the December 23 eruption. And I think here we have plate tectonic movements that opens the cracks. And then the magma that sits in the crust is just oozing out rather than pushing it up itself. So Iceland, in this case, is more of a passive situation where cracks open up and the magma rises up rather passively. This is why the intensity of the eruption is not so strong. I hope that helps.
Okay, I think time is up because we should be, Last question, probably this is the last one, okay?
Maybe the last one. Yeah. So I have a question. What is the difference between a spreading system in the Afar between Africa and Arabia in Iceland? Why in Afar there is 2 granite type in both sides? Is it a type granite? Is Iceland also have a granite? So because there is also a rifting system.
Yes, we also have felsic rocks and granitic rocks in Iceland, certainly in the main systems. And locally in southern Iceland, we have a little bit more of an alkaline touch to the chemistry. In northern Iceland, it's a little bit more calc-alkaline or subalkaline. So granites happen there as well, but they tend to be more sap alkaline. The classic alkaline granite signal is plume related, and we do see that, but it's much stronger in the Canary Islands, for example. There we get these cyanide types, these very alkaline systems, as opposed to classic calc-alkaline granites, which we have associated with subduction zones. So Iceland has these rocks as well, but mainly connected with the central volcanoes, and many of them are active. So I suspect there is more granite than we see in Iceland, because the erosion doesn't quite give us all of this away. And the shield basals, the flood basals in Iceland, they also cover these things. So we only see them in cliff exposures and things like that. Sometimes in central volcanoes we have access to them, and locally they can be a bit more alkaline. But because there we have this mixture of spreading as well as plume, we get actually a more mixed chemical signal. It's often referred to not as MORP and not as OIP, but it's often referred to as E or T MORP sequences, meaning transitional between these other extremes. Iceland is therefore a mixed system, and I don't expect the highly alkaline granites that we see in the Afar or in some of the other ocean island systems. My pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's the last question. Probably we can have another discussion after this.
I'll take the last question.
Okay, sure.
Absolutely,
Okay.
bring it on.
Okay, Professor, how do you ensure that the results from seismic tomography are more accurate than geological data? Because to model of the geological. In seismic tomography in Iceland, you suggest that single magma, but whereas previous model in Krakatau indicate two magma place. How do you interpret this difference between Iceland and Krakatau? Could it be difference in tectonic setting, data resolution, or geological, or more? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to stress that there is no reason why two volcanoes should be the same. Every volcano is unique, like you are unique and you're different to your brother, even if you come from the same source. So, well, I think. But your question is valid. We have to check this. And Krakatau has a very shallow system and a deeper system. And in a way, that's not completely dissimilar to this reality in Iceland. We have this deeper one at 9 to 12, and then we have a pocket of magma higher up. But I should stress, Krakatau is a very strange case because, let me do this. We have Java here, and we have Sumatra here. Yeah, thank you. We have Java here and Sumatra here, and the subduction pushes them like this. We actually have a rift system here. The Sunda Strait is a graben system as well. So there more magma comes up, and the chemistry of Krakatau is actually less subduction influenced than the other volcanoes on Sumatra and on Java. So there is actually a bit of a similarity to Iceland, strangely enough. And of course, the local stratigraphy will be important, the local fracture network will be important, and that determines where these different pockets might sit. But I think we will find more and more that these systems are actually multi-reservoirs, and depending, magma rises up, it gets stuck, it needs to fractionate, the rest rises up a little more, it gets stuck, it needs to fractionate, it degasses, it rises up a little more, etc., etc. So I believe that multi-reservoir systems are the norm rather than the exception. We often grow up in simple textbooks with one blob of magma chamber inside a volcano. I think this is oversimplified. And the tomography loses resolution. When the pockets are very small, the tomography cannot see them anymore. But when they're big enough, several kilometers, the tomography can see it. So there is uncertainty, but any method has uncertainty. And as long as we are confident that it's statistically relevant, we have to be honest about the uncertainty. But the detection of the system, I think, is real. We can then also argue about the conversion. We calculate from the seismics how deep it is, and depending what equation you use, it may be a little deeper or a little shallower. But that still means there is an anomaly. It's still there. The methods will surely get better, and I'm not a seismologist, so I will not improve the method. But when you see an anomaly, there is a reason for that, and that is the key observation. I would argue if this Icelandic anomaly is 9 to 12 kilometers or 10 to 12, it's hard. So it could be 7 to 10 or something as well. There's uncertainty there, but it still means we have a reservoir in the lower crust. And that is, I think, the important observation. I hope that helps. My pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much for all the questions and answers. Once more, we appreciate the discussion in this seminar, and then especially your speech, of course. And then finally, we will, because we appreciate that, we have some things to give to you as a token of our gratitude, actually. And then for Mr. Mizam, probably you can come to the stage and then become a representation from us to give the gift, memento, things like that. And camera.
Thank you. Wonderful. No. This is not suitable for liquid lava. No.
For cosplay as geologists.
That's okay. That's great. Thank you so much. But yes, I'll not use it for lava. Yes, coffee bean is okay.
And the last is this one. It's very heavy.
There is a newly launched book, Geology of Indonesia, written by our professor for commemorating his 89 years commemorating his birthday, launching the book. There are two volumes. The first volume, that big, and then this one is less big compared to the previous one.
Whoa, thank you so much. This is amazing. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, you're great. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that.
Okay, for the last, after this, we will have a picture together. We'll take a photo together. And for the audience online, you can turn on your camera. Please, we'll take a picture. And then please, set ini kamera. Okay, with that, we end the session of this Friday seminar, and then thank you very much for all the participants online and offline. And I close this event by saying, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Let's go home.